And I said, I can sell you 30 of them. And he's like, do you take PayPal? And I'm like, I'm going to name a dog or a child after you. Because you just made this work. In the credits for the first comic book I published, my best friend, I'm the illustrator and writer. My best friend, R.J. Swihart Jr., Jimmy, got credited as an embellisher and helping with the lettering. And then as editors, I named my mother, my grandmother, my aunt, and the girl I had a crush on in 7th grade. Politically speaking, I had covered all my bases. But that was me getting an education about how publishing worked. Star Child is what started my career. And we were talking over at my table a while ago. I was telling a bit of a story about this, and I thought that'd be the foundation before we get into questions, so you understand where this came from. I had just left a job in Ireland. I had moved to Ireland to take a job with the Sullivan Bluth Animation Studio. I moved there the day they lost their funding, and literally ended up with £1 Irish pound in my pocket. It's in my wallet right now. I carry it everywhere. And my solution to moving to another country and being laid off was, I'm going to start a comic book company. I didn't need a staff, I didn't need a building, I needed paper and pens and pencils, and so I moved back to Ireland, and from Ireland to Arizona. My wife got a job in Tempe selling floor coverings. We moved into an apartment where we had a sewing machine, a hope chest, a book collection, and a dog, because I'd sold everything else because I moved to Ireland. And I bought some paper and pens and pencils and started drawing the first issue of Star Child. Now, I knew how publishing worked. I knew how I needed to do this, and we had to sell at least 1,000 copies to pay the printing bill on 3,000. So we put the first issue in the catalogs, and we got the orders, and it came back in. It sold 1,200 copies. So good news. We can pay the printing bill and buy pizza. We've covered our priorities. Second issue, the orders came in for 600 copies. So now there's a bit of a problem. But 2 weeks later is when it really became a problem, because 2 weeks after the second issue of Star Child shipped, I crushed my drawing hand in a car accident. Driving down Chandler Boulevard, some young lady made an illegal turn in front of me. I plowed into her car, my hand was on the gear shift and plowed into the radio, and it smashed up my hand and the radio, which was really sad because I had finally figured out how to program the radio. And I woke up in the hospital after trying to push the car out of the intersection. I was embarrassed, I was blocking traffic. And some guy got out and he's like, man, you're in shock, you need to sit down. And I sat down, and that's the last thing I remember. And I woke up in the hospital, and the doctor said, you were really lucky. That was a bad accident. I said, is she okay? And he's like, oh, the other driver's fine. She was treated and released, and it was her fault, but she's okay. And I said, that's all that really matters. And he's like, well, you got a little banged up, but you're lucky. The only thing that got smashed up was your right hand. I'm like, well, that's not so good. And he's like, no, it's great. Well, unless you need your right hand for your job. And I said, actually, I'm a comic book artist. And he looks at me and he goes, not anymore, you're not. The specialist needs to come talk to you. And the specialist came and talked to me and told me that I'd crushed those joints. And he said, it's bad enough damage, we can't do surgery because that'll create scar tissue. And he said, as it is, if you do therapy for a year, you'll get about 40% of the use back, but you won't be able to grip a pen or pencil. That's the nature of that damage there. And he said, so I'm sorry to have to be the one, I'm the one that has to tell people bad news. And I said, well, I appreciate that, but you're wrong. This is what I do. I'm gonna heal, and I'm gonna go back to this. And it got bad enough at one point, they had a gentle intervention. You know, you younger guys, an intervention is when somebody's doing something that might hurt them. And everybody who loves them gets together and says, this is crazy, and you need to stop. Well, everybody who loved me, doctors and friends and cartoonists and my family, all got together and said, having a positive attitude is a good thing, but you need to face reality. You need to understand what's happened here, and this is over. Now, here's something that I do teach regularly, and I'm saying this to some of you young people in the audience, like you, the young lady here in the front row, and you guys right there in the back. This is an important thing, so I want you to listen, okay? I believe that every one of us has something unique that no one else is ever going to be able to really understand. Not your parents, not your teachers, not your best friend, not your brother. And that is your point of view. No one else in the world is going to see things just the way you do, because no one else has your unique combination of your memories and your dreams and your ambitions for what you want to do with your wonderful life. Only you have that. And I believe every once in a while, the universe opens itself up to you and you alone and shows you something possible. And you have to decide right then how much you believe in what you see, even if everyone else in the world tells you you're wrong. You have to believe you can be right. I believed I was right, and I made my choice. And I very politely told everyone in the world, thank you, but you're wrong. This is what I do. And I went to the therapist and said, okay, here's the deal. I know this is going to be hard. I don't have to be able to open up peanut butter jars. My wife is very strong. I don't have to be able to tie my shoes or dress myself. That is what sweats and Velcro are for. I have to be able to hold a pen and pencil. And he said, okay. So what we did for 4 hours a day for 8 months, I put screws into blocks of wood with my thumb and fingers and pulled them out again. Over and over and over and over and over. So I could hold a pen and pencil with my thumb and fingers. Then I had to figure out how to pay my bills because I was out of work because I had my hand in a brace from here to here. So I figured out something called Star Child Number 0, and that's what this looks like. Star Child Number 0 is a prequel to the other two, kind of like The Hobbit is the prequel to The Lord of the Rings. And what it was is I couldn't letter anymore because it's hand lettering, and I couldn't draw, but I could use a computer. And so I'd go to a Kinko's over in Mesa and I typeset the story. And I laid it out so there was a half-page drawing and then a half-page of story that's typeset. Then I figured out the secret of art. Not many people know this. You kids, you look pretty smart. You probably know this. The secret of art is two things. One, it's making lines on paper. And two, choosing where the lines go. Now, that sounds really simple. It's harder to do when your hand is in a brace. But here's the thing. This is where I chose the lines, right? You choose them up here. And I had another hand I could make lines with. So I did layouts for these drawings with my other hand. And then I started calling other comic book artists and asking if they would ink these drawings so we could publish the book. So I could pay my bills while my hand healed so I could do issue number 3. And some of the greatest artists in the world. How many of you in here know comics at all? Handful of people? Okay. I love that the two guys here in the back love comics. Awesome guys. Mm-hmm. Paul Chadwick, who does a comic called Concrete for Dark Horse, did a page. And he also wrote the Matrix online game after the Matrix movies. Craig Hamilton and Craig Russell and Colleen Doran, who have done The Sandman with Neil Gaiman at DC Comics, did pages. Dave Simon Gerhardt and Will Eisner, who the comic book awards are named after. The Eisner Awards in comics are named after him, and he did one of these pages for me. A science fiction author named Alan Dean Foster wrote an introduction, and a famous science fiction painter named Kelly Freas did the afterword. We needed to sell at least 3,000 copies to pay off the printing bills on the other issues and let me move on to the next issue. But remember what I said about believing when everybody else tells you maybe it's wrong? Here's what happens. If you do that hard thing that you believe in, even if everybody else says this is impossible, people see it in your face, and they hear it in your voice, and they find ways to help you the way all these artists found a way to help me. And we sold 45,000 copies of that comic book. And suddenly, I was the most famous new comic book guy in the business. There's a Jeff Smith that does a comic called Bone, was one of my friends, and people said, I'm the guy that Jeff Smith. And if you look, there's a documentary on him called The Cartoonist on Amazon Video, And I get notes from librarians that know the Dragon books that say, you know, there was a James Owen in comics in the 90s that looks just like you. What was fun was putting a documentary on TV and having my kids see pictures of me from 20 years ago. And my son turns to me and he's like, Dad, you haven't changed at all. And I gave him a raise in his allowance.
How much?
You know, I feed all of his goats that he raises, so he's already doing pretty good. The next issue of Star Child sold 17,000 copies that I could draw with my hand. And the thing is, the lines are the same lines because it was the same me making the choices. I just had to retrain my hand how to make the lines. So I didn't miss a step. I had to relearn how to use the pens and brushes, and so that issue number 3 looks just like issue number 2. It's just a year later. Then we got reorders for issues 1 and 2 that were 15,000 apiece. And then Dave Sim and Colleen Doran and Jeff Smith said, we're going to do a trade show tour of all the conventions in the country. Do you want to go with us? That's why I'm in the documentary. That started my career. I went on to do about another 30 issues of Star Child. We sold about 500,000 comic books. Because we'd sold all those comic books, a fan in Germany asked if I'd be interested in writing a novel. And I'd been getting letters from this guy for years. Turns out he's like the Stephen King of Germany. He's a huge author over there, and I was his favorite writer. And he signed me to write a series of novels called Mythworld. And that put me in a position to be able to write and illustrate Here There Be Dragons, because I'd done 700 pages of Star Child, and I'd written all these Mythworld novels for a publisher who published them in German. And that was the experience I needed to put me on the path that I'm on now. And something I just mentioned to somebody is, there's material in this book. It's 704 pages. And people paid me, buying this book today, they paid me for work I did 22 years ago. If that's not like the greatest opportunity and blessing in the world, to have people appreciate work that you did years ago, you know, that's incredible to me. One of the reasons I did a collection like this, and there's little short essays between the chapters, I kept all the original art. And one of the reasons why is, like, 1994, I was doing it monthly, a monthly comic book by myself, writing, penciling, inking, lettering, painting the covers, and publishing the sucker. I did not sleep much in 1994. But I could tell you, based on the calendar of when they came out, I could show you the original art at my studio. I could reach into that stack and pull out a page and say, on April 9th in 1994, this is what I did with my life. How many of us get an opportunity to do something like that and say, this is how I used the day of my life? Because, you know, that's a lesson I've learned over and over again, is none of us knows how much time we have. And we spend so much of it on things that we don't love. We spend so much time on things that don't make us happy. And so much of that time, that's our choice. And that's why I spend all this time doing panels at conventions. That's why I come to schools all the time and look at kids and say, you know what? The younger you are when you start making choices, the better your life can be. And everybody can live an extraordinary life and do things that they love and make them happy. And the younger you are when you start, the better that is. And somebody had just asked me, just before I came to this panel, well, how young were you when you decided this is what you wanted to do? And I said, I can tell you pretty much exactly. 6. I was 6. And I know this because a couple of years ago, I was surfing around on eBay, and I saw a listing that said James Owen's first published work. And I thought, well, that's like an issue of Star Child, maybe. And I click on it, and this image pops up. Goldilocks and the Three Bears plus Santa Claus by Jamie Owen, age 6. And I looked at that for a minute and thought, when I was 6 years old, I did these little cartoon booklets, Goldilocks and the Three Bears and Little Red Riding Hood, plus Santa Claus. Apparently I like mixing mythologies, so I put Santa Claus in both of them. I thought that was cool. And there were 15 pages stapled together. I'd put them in a little red wagon and wheeled them around the block because I wasn't allowed to cross the street. And I sold them to the neighbors for 15 cents a piece. So I could go down to the corner store and buy this laser gun that shot sparks. And I raised my own money to do that. And a childhood friend of mine moved his mother's house from Taylor to Payson, and he found this Goldilocks book, and he put it on eBay. So I thought, that's awesome, I want to own that. So I bid $10 on it, and it beeps at me and says, you've been outbid. I thought, well, okay, 20 bucks. Beep, you've been outbid. And then I realized we're into the last hours of this auction. It's a 3-day auction, there's like 3 hours left, and people are outbidding me. And I look and there's like 21 people watching this. And I thought, I either have the best fans in the world or these people are out of their cotton picking minds. So I start bidding on it, and people are waiting, and then they outbid me, and I have to bid again. And then we get up to the last few minutes, and there's like 4 people bidding over $50, and I'm getting really frustrated about all this. So I checked my bank account and bid everything I had in the bank, 72 bucks. I'm like, all right, yeah, beat that. And I wait, and the clock ticks down, and I get sniped in the last few seconds, $72.50, and I lost it. So I sent a message to the guy that won. I said, I don't know if you know this. This was James Owen you were bidding against. He goes, James, I'm so sorry. It's me, your buddy Alex. I didn't know your screen name.
Oh.
I said, I didn't know your screen name. And we've been bidding against each other. And he says, well, how long have you been in this? And I said, well, since it went over $50. And he's like, yeah, can you believe the nerve of those people bidding us out? I'm like, yeah, I know. I said, well, at least you got it. And he's like, yeah, I'm glad it's me. He has a James Owen gallery in his house. First editions, original art, all my art prints. And I said, man, well, I'm glad you got it. But I would really love to own that little booklet if you wouldn't mind selling it to me. And he said, James, I would love to sell it to you, but I have a really complete James Owen collection. So how about if I send you a scan of it? And I thought about this and thought, you know, this guy just paid $72.50 for a 15-page cartoon book about Goldilocks and Santa Claus written and drawn by a 6-year-old. He deserves to own that book. But that's really the start of it, because you know what? It wasn't because that book was so cool. It was kind of cool. But that's not why he paid that. You know why he paid that much for that book? Because of this, and because of this, and because of this, and because of every other choice I've made about the work that I do. All of these things made that funny little book worth all that money to all those people. So the younger you are when you decide what you want to be, the better your life can be. And it doesn't matter what that is. You don't have to be an artist or a writer. You can be a chef or a pilot or an engineer, whatever it is. As long as it's something you love, that's what matters. And I've been doing the thing that I love for a very long time now. And I'm very grateful that that's what I get to do. So there's my 100 words instead of 10 words introduction about how all this came about and why we're here celebrating the 20th anniversary of the nearly complete Essential Star Child.
Well, thank you. That was an amazing lead-in. Certainly better than anything I would have put together to introduce you. Okay, so why don't we do this? Since we are focused on the 20th anniversary of Star Child, let's try and keep at least the first couple questions focused on that book or that work, if you have questions about it. Is that okay with you?
Oh, totally.
Okay. So who wants to go first?
We got the little guy right here in the very back. We'll come back to you. How about the guy next to you? That's a great question. Yes, what is Star Child really about? Star Child is about storytelling, and it's about a young man